Jam on toast!
Hello and good day to all y'all. We're here today to talk about Big Fish. The short sale of this film is that it is a father and son trying to reconnect. And the father is telling his son all about his life through these autobiographical tall tales, if you will. I do have to say that my love for this movie is indeed the scene with all the daffodils. It's a beautifully laid out scene. It's from an above standpoint. We are looking down upon him in a field of daffodils that just engulfs the scene and gives you a feeling of infinite mightiness. And of course the actual scene is very touching in itself, you hear, but the visual effect of it was truly moving to me. Now, as ironical as it may be in itself, my hate for this movie was indubitably the very boring style in which the father delivered all his stories, which I do understand sounds terribly unlike myself. But MVP of this movie, without a doubt, was Ewan McGregor. He brought to life scenes that I never would have thought would have been interesting. He put the delivery of the lines in front of all else and made this script shine. But without further ado, let's move on to the categories. Aesthetics. This movie used some very interesting tools here and there, especially the scenes where they referred back to it later on. Those beautiful shots of the main street where you're looking down past the shoes on the telephone line with houses neat. Both the original view and the after shot after everything's dilapidated and such. Those are cleverly utilized tools to make us reconnect with the previous story without being so obvious-like about it. While it did have some good tools, it even used some CGI to good effect. And credit where credit is due, I do believe that the Giant's perspective on things contrasted very well with the rest of the real world, if you will. Unfortunately, in of all itself, I don't think it was very moving. It was well produced, but the scenes themselves weren't very strong most of the time. Aesthetics gets a 75. Moving on to character development. Now, this entire movie was nothing but character development. If in nothing else, the father's. Because remember, the movie's all about the son trying to learn who his father was. And a man who's that desperate is not going to leave any stone unturned, so we are looking every which way in this to figure out who this man could be. What it does do well is it enlightens us on all the little characters in his life. If you are smart about it, you can view every story he does tell as an extension of himself. Every character is a part of him that he is expressing to his son and people, but he's shining it up and making it look nice and pretty for them, so that they have a better perspective of him when it's all said and done. Now, perhaps because of its tall tale nature, the character development is done very well, but the characters to be developed aren't very strong, because they're meant to be cheap and forgettable, so that the storyteller is what comes to light in the end. Character development gets a 70. Storyline. The deception here is that this is actually two done stories. It's a story of the father telling the son about his life. Therefore, it's about the father. If you notice, especially at the beginning of the movie, we are learning about the son's life as well and how his interactions with his father were over his entire life. And through the father telling his story, we can pick pieces and put together his son's story as well. Now, as clever as that may be, the stories themselves are not that compelling. All the time that we are in real time, it's the son talking to an old dying man, which may be sad, but it's relatively boring and uneventful. When it does get good is when we are being told stories of the past, and even then it's limited, because mostly we're operating under the assumption that it's a tall tale, so we're not given the opportunity to believe in it from the beginning. And because they are tall tales, they're told in a manner in which they are supposed to be unbelievable, so the immersion breaks a little bit. Storyline does get a 50. Compulsion. This movie was dreadfully boring. I constantly found myself wondering if there was laundry to do, chores to be had, or general other things to keep myself busy while the movie played. On occasion, you do happen across a great mini story laced into the greater mix of things. And that is worth something. However, without Ewan McGregor, despite all the other good actors, I'm not sure if this would have held its salt. And perhaps for the more tender-hearted, there'll be a bit more urgency to see what is happening in this story. But for me, Compulsion gets a 40. Now, if we go down and total everything up, we get an average of 58.75. Makes it a fail in my book, but don't let that stop you. For my wrap-up review, I will say that this was a terribly written story, but given to some wonderful people who took it to the 9 yards, and it sailed as much as it could. All the actors did phenomenal for what they were given, and the production specialists did wonderful. The director picked excellent scenes to display all the story in, but the overlying problem is that the story itself just did not carry. It can be really summed up in a few sentences. Man grows up, man leaves town, man finds girl, man wins girl, man has son, man pursues his dreams, tells stories to son, who then hates him and tries to reconcile right before his death. So I do not recommend this movie, but if you are tender-hearted and you enjoy a sob story, by all means, give this one a go and see what you can make of it. I don't believe that's about it for this accent. I'm Cameron. Have a nice day.